Most cosmologists claim that the universe began some 13 billion years ago from an event known as the Big Bang. Theoretical physicist Steven Weinberg describes what it might have looked like. In the beginning, there was an explosion. In only 3 minutes, 98% of all the matter that exists or ever will be was produced. We had the universe. For 2,500 years, most agreed with Aristotle's idea of what was called a steady-state universe, meaning everything that exists always existed, with no beginning and no end. But in the 1920s, Belgian astronomer Georges Lemaitre concluded that the entire universe sparked into existence in a trillionth of a second out of nothingness in an intense light. This is how we would expect the universe to respond if God were to utter the command in Genesis 1:3, "Let there be light." In other words, the origin of the universe unfolded exactly as one would have expected after reading Genesis, and after 2,500 years, the Bible had it right, and secular science had it wrong. Stephen Hawking said, "Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing." Hawking was clearly an intellectual genius, but short on wisdom. Professor John Lennox, who teaches mathematics and philosophy, has demonstrated that there are 3 errors of logic contained in that one simple sentence, and they all boil down to circular reasoning. Hawking is basically saying that the universe exists because the universe needed to exist, and because it needed to exist, it created itself. To illustrate, if renowned chef Jamie Oliver were to say that he could prove that peanut butter on toast is the best tasting food that ever existed because in all of history no food has ever tasted better, you would probably refute that he had not proven anything, and you would be right. This prompts Lennox to conclude, "Nonsense remains nonsense even when spoken by famous scientists." For the last 150 years, Darwinists have been saying that God is unnecessary to explain man's existence and evolution replaces God. But evolution only tells you what happens once you have life. So where did something that's alive come from? Well, Darwin never really addressed it, but only the Bible does in one simple but very revealing verse in Genesis 1:20. And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea and every moving thing. In other words, creation happened because God said it should happen. And even what looks to our eyes to be a blind, unguided process is really divinely controlled from start to finish. That now leads us to how we can make an argument on a scientific basis. We call this creation science. We never would make the argument that this is a science versus creation issue. It is not, certainly not. The science is not an issue as long as we are dealing with cosmology, biology, paleontology, or archaeology. The problem lies in a worldview that causes one to interpret the evidence in a way that suits or satisfies their conclusions. No amount of semantics can give credibility to both a young 6,000-year Earth and a 4.6 billion-year-old one. So let's start looking at the evidence. In just the past few decades, scientists have come to realize that the parameters in both physics and cosmology are exquisitely organized within a small range to allow the emergence and sustenance of life. Freeman Dyson, PhD, says, As we look out into the universe and identify the many accidents of physics and astronomy that have worked to our benefit, it almost seems as if the universe must in some sense have known that we were coming. All that is allowed to exist rests along a razor's edge. If the laws were changed at just the slightest either to the left or to the right, nothing in the universe would allow life to form and would be inhospitable for life. Paul Davies, PhD, states, "The cliché that life is balanced on a knife edge is a staggering understatement in this case. No knife in the universe could have an edge that fine." Dr. Mark Wharton goes on to state that if the balance between gravity and the expansion rate were altered by 1 part in 1 million billion 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 billion, there would be no galaxies, stars, planets, or life. This is what we call exquisite fine-tuning. There are likely hundreds of physical or cosmological parameters that must be finely tuned in order for life to be possible. The strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the velocity of light, the initial uniformity of radiation, the ratio of electron to proton mass, and the entropy level of the universe, for starters. To put the question of fine-tuning to rest, English mathematical physicist Roger Penrose states, "If we combined all the laws that must be fine-tuned, we couldn't even write down the number in full, since it would require more zeros than the number of elementary particles in the universe." The planet Jupiter emits twice as much energy as it receives from the Sun. Such a process cannot be sustained for millions or billions of years. The same story with Neptune, which is a bigger problem, being further from the Sun. The Earth's magnetic field that protects us from solar radiation is running down every year. The rate has been observed for the past near 200 years to be decreasing by approximately 5% per century. This has been constant for the past 2. If we were to wind it back just 1 million years, the levels of radiation would be so catastrophic there would be no possibility for life on Earth. Our moon is recessing from the Earth at approximately 1.5 inches per year due to a process called tidal bulge. Run that back 6,000 years, and it would have been approximately 730 feet closer to Earth. Not a problem considering it is 400,000 kilometers away. This poses to be a major problem for the billions of years theory. Consider the moon to be only half this distance. The gravitational forces would be incredible. Any closer than this, it would be devastating. Not to mention that only 1 billion years ago, so they say Earth is 4.5 billion years old, the moon would have had to be in the same position as the Earth. Now, let's consider the comets. These stellar bodies are composed of icy material which releases gases as they near the Sun. We see this as a tail while passing by the Earth. The average size comet that passes Earth would not survive longer than about 100,000 years maximum. Every time we see one, its mass is decreasing. One argument by secular cosmologists is that there must be some kind of comet generator out there that creates new ones. Just a flimsy rescuing device on their part, because there has never been anything like it observed. Spiral galaxy winding is yet another major problem. If the universe was billions of years old, you would not be able to see the spiral formation. They would be twisted beyond recognition. Scientists have written computer simulations on some of the known spiral galaxies and their known velocities, and running them for 1 billion years is precisely what you get. No more spiral. Also, the blue stars in these galaxies expend their fuel very quickly, which cannot last billions of years. Another argument brought forth by secularists is the distant starlight problem for creationists. It is true that distant galaxies are billions of light years away, but this is not a time distance, but rather a physical distance. Through the entirety of space, we do not know what the actual speed of light is from one end to the other. It cannot be tested or proven from one star to another. The argument states that the universe had to be here for billions of years for us to be able to see these distant stars. This is not necessarily the case because of gravitational time dilation. Since we do not know the one-way speed of light, then we cannot say it is billions of years old. The leading proposed theory is by using this anisotropic synchrony convention, or ASC, as proposed by Albert Einstein. This would mean that it took no time at all for light to get here. It is infinitely fast. That means that at the point of creation, there was no entropy, meaning that the speed of light was infinite. Time passed differently. Perhaps time that we know it today really didn't exist at all. Then, at the point that Adam brought sin to the world, it brought death because time, as we know it, began, causing age, death, decay, and, among other things, entropy. The Bible also suggests this is the case. In Genesis we read, "And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so." This strongly suggests that the light arrived here instantaneously. So it really doesn't matter how many millions or billions of light years the stars are from Earth. The light was already here the moment sin changed everything. Join me next time as we continue with our study in part 2 of The Universe, where we will uncover the most shocking and indisputable evidence you've never heard before, as we lay out the greatest support for an intelligent agent behind the creation of the universe. Here on Evidence Uncovered.